My village lies nestled between vast rice fields, connected by a long, winding road. These villages are like small islands of land rising amidst the green expanse where grass swayed in the wind. Each village had a preschool, an elementary school, and a junior high school. High school was further away, in a neighboring district, so students from our area all converged at the elementary and junior high schools. Due to the limited resources in the late 20th and early 21st centuries, the elementary and junior high schools often shared facilities. Elementary students attended in the morning, and junior high students in the afternoon, or vice versa. The wooden desks were long, designed for 3 or 4 students to share, and after years of use, they were rickety. Sometimes, you had to prop up a broken leg while sitting, or the whole desk would collapse. This school was also the source of my deepest fears whenever I thought about it. The few 2-story, brightly painted buildings felt luxurious. Most of the school consisted of old buildings with red-tiled roofs and dirt or cement floors. The schoolyard was shaded by old phoenix trees, banyan trees, and milk flower trees. Our village school also had a towering eucalyptus garden next to a gray memorial dedicated to fallen soldiers. Across from it was the commune's People's Committee building, 2 swimming pools the size of rice paddies, and behind it, a field dotted with graves right next to our classrooms. I was supposed to study there forever, yet these graves rarely looked tended to, often overgrown with weeds. There was no security guard back then, just a school caretaker, Mr. John. He usually lived near the school to oversee everything. Mr. John was an elderly man, strong and resilient. My friends and I often gathered around him during recess to listen to his stories. He spoke of the old days, when famine ravaged the northern delta, filling the roads with the dead, and nearly every day, mass graves had to be dug. Days when the hunger was so horrific that people traded their own children for food to survive the pangs of starvation and the guilt of their own survival. He even told us that when the new 2-story school was built, they dug up so many skeletons that they didn't know where to put them, so they threw them into the swimming pool on the other side. Later, during a project to dredge the river and prepare for a flood, people pulled those skeletons out again and reburied them somewhere else. Some kind-hearted villagers dug proper graves and reinterred them, though they were no relatives. Who would spend such effort in those hard times? Mr. John also spoke of lying in the guard's room at night, watching the eucalyptus trees bend halfway over, then spring back up, the haunting cries of wandering souls echoing through the quiet. It was truly terrifying. Mr. John would always warn us after each storytelling session that if we forgot a notebook or pen at school, we absolutely must not come back for it at midday or evening, not even when dusk was just settling. And certainly never alone. My friends and I listened intently, exchanging frightened glances, which only made his stories seem even more mysterious. My village was a strip of land at the end of the road, and my house was at the very end of that strip, right next to the fields. This meant we were far from the bustling heart of the village and far from the school. So my parents always picked me up from school. On the path through the fields, there were a few graves whose origins I never knew. Sometimes, I'd see people sweeping them or lighting incense. My mother often picked up my younger sibling, who attended elementary school in the morning, so by noon, they'd usually walk home. I attended junior high in the afternoon. When it was time to go home, our house was far across the fields, and I was afraid of the dark, so I'd often wait for my parents to pick me up. Most of the time, they were late, and Mr. John would wait with me. Thanks to his presence, I was much less scared. Whenever he saw my parents, he'd remind them not to be so late, as the area was deserted. My mother would always agree, but then she'd get caught up in work and couldn't make it on time. In the second semester of 6th grade, one evening while studying at home, I suddenly remembered I'd left my ink bottle in my desk at school. Back then, we used fountain pens, and every time I refilled the ink, my hands would get messy. Honestly, my pen still had enough ink to finish my homework, and it wouldn't have been a problem to borrow ink at school the next day. But for some reason, the thought of that ink bottle in my desk drawer and the familiar school filled my mind. I felt an irresistible urge to go and get it immediately. I don't know where I found the courage, but I walked alone from my house to the school. On both sides were rice fields, not yet hushed, with crickets chirping loudly. It was a dark night, moonless and starless. I walked steadily, without missing a beat. The path felt endless, but after about a month I reached the school gate. It wasn't locked. There was no one else at school, so the atmosphere was eerily quiet. The eucalyptus trees stood tall and still, not bending like Mr. John's stories. The darkness was as black as ink, yet I still managed to find my way to my classroom, which was in a single-story building with old, moss-green tiled roofs without a single ray of light. My hand found its way to the fourth desk on the inner side. I sat on the outermost seat. In my desk drawer was my ink bottle. I touched it. It was cold. As I was about to turn and leave, I heard footsteps shuffling in the hallway. Then, a soft, melodious humming from the hallway. I didn't recognize the tune, but it sounded familiar. Which teacher would still be at school at this hour? Curiosity led me to cautiously peek through the window. My classroom was at the end of the old block, next to the newly built two-story block. If a teacher wanted to reach the end of the old block, they would have to pass my classroom. I watched intently, my eye pressed against the crack in the door. The teacher wore a white shirt, her hair shoulder length. I couldn't see her face clearly, but she must have been beautiful. She had such a lovely singing voice. I don't know what possessed me, but I quietly stepped out of the door and ran after her. When I reached the next classroom, I no longer heard the humming. My heart sank. I looked around, but it was still pitch black. A sudden fear overwhelmed me, and I turned and ran through an endless black void, unable to see anything. After an unknown amount of time, I found myself standing at the foot of the stairs of the new building. I heard the melodious humming again, but I looked around and saw no teacher. Before I could even think, my feet carried me under the staircase. I sat still as a statue, holding my breath, waiting to see if anything would appear. The teacher from before walked past again. I saw that she had no legs. Her beautiful, full face was there, but her eyes were empty, soulless. I gasped, silently calling for Grandma. It felt as if someone was urging me from behind, and I suddenly ran. I couldn't tell which way the school gate was. I only knew I had to escape this place, running into a black abyss with no end, no direction. Suddenly, a faint light appeared. I ran towards it for a few steps and saw Mr. John getting off his motorbike, muttering, "I clearly locked the gate when I left. Why is it open now?" He looked up and saw me rushing out from the classrooms. His eyes were strange as he looked behind me. He asked in alarm, "What are you doing here at this hour? Didn't I warn you?" I replied, "I forgot my ink bottle in my desk, so I came to get it." He quickly told me to go home with him, closed the school gate, and then helped me onto his motorbike. He started the engine and drove me home. On the way, I told him everything I had experienced. He listened in silence, not saying a word. When we reached my house gate, he called out loudly to my parents. They came out, startled to see me with him. My parents had been working hard all day, finished dinner, and I had already gone to my room to study. They hadn't paid attention, just watched the news and went to sleep, unaware I had left the house in their absence. Mr. John told my parents to get some newspaper and burn it for me to step over 9 times, then circle the house. My parents quickly did as he said. Having no newspaper, they pulled a handful of straw from the front yard and lit it for me to step over 9 times. My parents profusely thanked Mr. John and invited him in for a cup of tea, but he refused. He looked at me, then glared at my parents, saying, "You need to take better care of your child. You could lose her to the spirits." After that, he started his motorbike and sped off. My parents asked me why I had left the house. My father was about to scold me, but my mother stopped him, saying it was late and I should sleep and we could talk tomorrow. My mother took me to my bedroom. Our family wasn't poor, so even as a child, I had my own room while my parents had theirs. After helping me wash my face, my mother tucked me in and left. Just as I was about to close my eyes, I saw the teacher standing in the corner of my room, staring at me. I stared back. She didn't say anything, nor did she make any alarming movements. I was too tired and frightened to react, so I just closed my eyes and tried to sleep. The next morning, my mother woke me up for school and found me burning with fever. I had a high fever. My parents panicked, calling for my father, putting compresses on my forehead to cool me down, and giving me traditional medicine to drink. By noon, I was still dizzy and sleepy. Even at school, I couldn't keep my eyes open, dozing off in class. I was usually a diligent and good student, so the teacher didn't punish me, just told me to go home and rest early. That day, because I was sick, my parents picked me up early. I didn't have to stay late waiting. From that day on, I felt weak all the time. I wasn't technically sick, but I was extremely tired and sleepy. I could fall asleep anytime, and every day I saw the teacher standing in the corner of my room, staring intently at me. Sometimes she would even sit at the foot of my bed. I told my mother about it, but she dismissed it, saying it was because I was ill and dreaming, so I stopped telling her. The more time passed, the more I slept. I didn't feel like eating or drinking, and I became sickly pale, like a yellow leaf. In just a few months, I was terribly thin. My mother took me to the children's hospital, then Bach my hospital, but they couldn't find anything wrong. Yet, I didn't get better. It was just because I slept too much and didn't eat or drink that I became so weak. My mother took me to the provincial hospital. The doctor checked my blood pressure and found it too low, so they admitted me. In the hospital room with me was a little girl a few years younger than me. My mother was superstitious, so she brought the little girl milk and fruit. The next day, my relatives came to visit, and when they left, my mother gave the little girl some cakes, but she refused to take them. I didn't understand why she suddenly changed her mind. I just smiled and thanked her. Then the little girl whispered, "The lady in the corner of the room won't let me take it." The people in the room looked around confused, but saw no one, so they assumed it was just a child's unpredictable mood. That night, the girl had a continuous high fever, pointing to the corner of the room and screaming, "The lady in the corner of the room says this is her daughter's stuff. I can't take it." Then she pointed at me and said, "This is her daughter. She's here to take her daughter away. If you take her daughter's things, she'll take you instead." The girl spoke with such urgency, writhing as if she was in pain. Her mother was terrified. The next morning, she had the girl transferred to another hospital. My mother also remembered the story I had told her earlier about the teacher standing in the corner of my room every night. I was still mostly asleep, only occasionally waking up for a short while before drifting off again. The story about the little girl in the hospital room was something I only heard about later. While lying in the hospital, during those brief, tired moments of lucidity, I saw the teacher standing in the corner of the room, her eyes never leaving me. I told my mother. My mother said, "The nurse just came to check on you and left." But deep down, my mother was worried, so she secretly placed a knife at the head of my hospital bed. That day, I found myself standing in front of a dense but peaceful forest. The teacher was holding my hand, leading me through the woods. After a few steps, an old man suddenly rushed forward, embraced my shoulders, and pulled me in the opposite direction. I opened my eyes to find myself lying in my hospital bed, my mother holding me, crying hysterically. My father said he touched my hands, feet, and chest, and they were ice cold. He called my name repeatedly, but I wouldn't wake up. Fearing the worst, he asked someone to find a doctor. Just as the doctor arrived, I woke up. My aunt called from our hometown, telling my mother not to delay. The previous night, Grandpa had appeared in her and Mom's dreams, telling them to find a shaman and have a ritual performed to banish a spirit. He said a female ghost was trying to take me as her child, and if they didn't act quickly, it would be too late. My mother's face turned pale. She begged to have me discharged from the hospital and called home for my father to find a shaman immediately. Back then, mobile phones weren't common. To make or receive a call, you had to go to the hospital gate and pay the tea vendor to use her landline. My mother rushed back and forth tirelessly, but finding a shaman wasn't easy. Everyone she asked just shook their heads, refusing to take the case. While struggling, unsure what to do, on the way home, my parents encountered an old man who looked rather shabby but had bright eyes, sitting at the tea stall. He looked at my parents, then at me, and clearly stated my name and where I lived. He explained that because my parents often picked me up late, I was frequently alone on the dike near the school, which attracted the attention of this female spirit. Since I also had a weak yin aura, I was more susceptible to being influenced. The spirit couldn't harm people in a crowd, so it waited until I was alone to follow me home and try to take me as her child. He added that it was fortunate my maternal grandfather was a powerful spirit who had pulled me back. Otherwise, I would have been taken by now. My father was an atheist and didn't believe in the supernatural, but after meeting this shaman, his attitude completely changed. My parents were overjoyed and pleaded with the shaman to perform the ritual to banish the spirit. He promised to come in 3 days and instructed my parents to prepare offerings carefully and set up a 3-tiered altar so he could perform the ritual immediately upon arrival. With 3 days until the shaman arrived, my parents dared not relax. They stayed by my side constantly. At night, I lay between them. I still saw the teacher looking at me with sad eyes. The ghost no longer looked as plump as when I first saw her at school. She was gaunt and emaciated. Oddly, I no longer feared this teacher. After all that had happened, I knew she was a wandering spirit. After the ritual was complete, the shaman instructed my parents to take me to a pagoda to stay for a few days. It was an ancient pagoda in Bac Ninh, with expansive grounds and antique architecture. I stayed there for a week, waking early every day to chant scriptures with the young monks, fetch water, and then sit and read the sutras. After a week, my complexion was much healthier, and I no longer craved sleep as before. Since I had to go back to school, my parents asked the monks for permission to take me home. The head monk warned them not to let me out at night and to avoid deserted places. I remembered his advice and returned home with my parents. After some time, I was much better, and my parents were somewhat relieved. The only change was that my parents were never late picking me up anymore. My academic performance improved, and I frequently participated in gifted student competitions. However, since that incident, I would sometimes see a shimmering white shadow on the road at night, especially around the 7th month. I never dared go out after dark because I had seen too much. I tried to persuade my friends to go home when dusk fell, but they wouldn't listen. My house was at the end of the village. About 200 meters from my house was Uncle Tom's house. His children were all grown and married, except for Jane, the youngest, who was studying in Hanoi. She loved to go out and play. That time, she came home for a break. She went out to play from morning till past noon and didn't come back. Aunt Sarah came to our house to borrow a motorbike to look for her, but she couldn't find Jane anywhere. That afternoon, it was Sunday, and I was at home studying. A few friends came by, inviting me to play shuttlecock. I usually walked into the village, but no one wanted to play in the empty lot with me. Some were busy sweeping the yard, others watching their siblings or boiling water. Only one friend reluctantly agreed to go, and on the very first kick, the shuttlecock flew into a bamboo grove nearby. I carefully pushed my head into the bamboo grove to find the shuttlecock. There, I saw Jane lying peacefully asleep amidst the bamboo. I quickly called everyone over to help carry her out of the grove and bring her home. My interaction with the spirits hadn't ended there. When Jane was pulled out of the bamboo grove, she was like a lifeless shell. Her hair was messy, her clothes disheveled, and she didn't bother to tidy herself. At dinner, she only wanted to eat with her hands, refusing chopsticks. When Uncle Tom and Aunt Sarah reminded her, she'd lethargically get up and refuse to eat anymore. After a few days, they gave up trying to reason with her, letting her eat as she pleased. My house was next to the swamp, also known as the Lonely Land, due to sparse population. Sometimes people would have fruit. That day it was raining and my family had a jackfruit. My father took a piece over to Uncle Tom's house. Neighbors helped each other out, especially in times of need, and Uncle Tom's house was close to ours. I skipped happily over to Uncle Tom's house, finding the gate unlocked and no one answering. It was a late autumn afternoon, the sunlight had faded considerably and the house lights weren't on, making it look a bit dark. I pushed the gate open. The house was empty and the doors were wide open. I died of curiosity again. I placed the jackfruit on the coffee table. I leaned in and called out a few times, but no one answered. The door to Jane's room was ahead, slightly ajar. I crept closer and slowly pushed the door open, peering inside. Through the faint light, I saw Jane sitting with her back to the wall. Just as I started to call out, "Jane, are you there?" I heard her muttering something unclear. A chill ran down my spine. Oh no, I thought. I tried to pull the door shut, but it felt like someone was holding it from the inside. I couldn't close it. At that moment, Jane slowly turned her face to look directly at me. Her face was gaunt, hollow-eyed, and her gaze was vacant, just like the teacher I had seen. I screamed and ran out, yelling loudly. When I reached the living room, Jane lunged at me. She grabbed my hair and yanked me back. Her eyes rolled back, a ghastly white, and she cackled menacingly. Trembling, she rushed at me, grabbing my throat. I couldn't breathe. I frantically used both hands to pry her fingers away, but her strength was terrifying. I couldn't budge them at all. Just then, Aunt Sarah, returning from the fields, rushed in and pulled Jane away from me. It took a while. I was released just as I was about to pass out, coughing and gasping for a long time. Jane looked at me, roaring like a wild beast. The witnesses advised Aunt Sarah to find a shaman immediately. Once I recovered, I ran home, never daring to step foot in Uncle Tom's house again. After that incident, my parents asked for me to be transferred to the district school, where I would live with my maternal aunt and uncle. From what my parents told me, Uncle Tom had brought a shaman to exorcise Jane. Before the shaman arrived, Jane was always in a daze, disoriented, and speaking incoherently. After the exorcism, she stopped eating with her hands, but her personality had changed. She started going out to bars or clubs, dressing up and putting on makeup, leaving early and returning late. Aunt Sarah's constant advice was useless. Uncle Tom was too disheartened to even speak. As a result, their home was always gloomy. I transferred to the district school and lived with my maternal aunt. She had no husband or children and worked in an office, so she pampered and loved me greatly. Every day, she would buy fresh ingredients and cook delicious meals for me. After a few months with her, I gained a lot of weight. My aunt's house wasn't as spacious as mine, but it had 3 floors: a garage, living room, bathroom, and kitchen on the first floor, 2 bedrooms on the second, and a prayer room and drying area on the third. I had my own bedroom, but I preferred sleeping with my aunt. It felt more lively. In the evenings, I would do my homework while my aunt read beside me. My parents came up a few times, bringing my aunt and uncle vegetables, rice, eggs, and fruit from our garden. My aunt's house was close to the school, so I could walk there in just a few steps. On my way to school, past the empty lot, there were a few graves that looked very old. Knowing my place, I rarely played out there. If I had to go, I always rushed, avoiding stepping out around noon. That day, my aunt had a party meeting to attend. She repeatedly told me to stay home and only ask her if I needed anything when she returned. I agreed and went upstairs to study. Everything I needed was in the house, so I had no intention of going out. It was already dark. While I was struggling with some math problems, I heard someone calling my name repeatedly from downstairs. I always carried my keys when I went to school or anywhere else. Perhaps I had forgotten them today. I hurried downstairs to open the door, thinking that the voice didn't quite sound like my aunt's. As I was about to unlock the door, I heard my aunt calling from the 3rd floor, followed by the rustling sound of clothes made of velvet and the clinking of chains. I immediately thought, Aunt is home and doing laundry. I often helped her bring clothes downstairs, but I might have misheard upstairs as downstairs. I quickly turned and ran upstairs. When I reached the 2nd floor, I tripped, falling painfully and bruising my cheek slightly. My aunt came home and asked me where I'd been, smelling of the outside. I told her I was studying, heard someone calling, and was about to open the door, then heard her doing laundry on the 3rd floor, so I was going up to help when I tripped. My aunt looked at me without saying anything, then said, "I didn't do any laundry today. If I did, I would have put them away before dinner, not left them until now." She led me up to the 3rd floor. I had been living there for months, but this was my first time setting foot up here, as she never let me help with anything. She pointed to a framed photo on the altar and said, "That's your maternal grandfather." Oh, this was the man who had pulled me back when the teacher led me into the forest. My aunt told me that my grandfather loved my mother dearly. My mother was barely a few months old when my grandmother was about to give birth, and he went off to war. He only returned when my mother was a young woman. He loved my mother the most because he hadn't been able to cradle her as a baby, and she grew up enduring all sorts of hardships. In his eyes, my mother was the most unfortunate, but also the most cheerful and easygoing. When my mother decided to marry my father, he tried to stop her but couldn't, which made him very sad. My father's family was poor and lived far away, so he feared my mother would suffer if she married so far. When my mother left with her husband, he didn't see her off, but stood on the bridge, watching her until she was out of sight. He was a war invalid and had been sick ever since. My mother was his only child. I was born after he passed away, so I never met him. My father sympathized with my mother, having to live with her in-laws in a strange land, so he bought a piece of land at the end of the village in my maternal grandparents' hometown for us to live and farm. My mother lived there, surrounded by her own relatives and family, which helped my health improve. I stayed with my aunt for a few years. When I was in 9th grade, my parents brought me home, seeing that my condition had stabilized. I was a good student but had few friends, as everyone who played with me got scared away. So my parents bought me a computer to research information and help with my studies. But my parents were strict, so I was stubborn. I wouldn't argue, but I would silently sulk. The computer was bought but not allowed to be used until I was accepted into a top-tier high school. I was upset, so I didn't touch it. Every night, I stayed up late studying until almost midnight. Next to my room was a small dirt path that villagers used to go to the fields. Beyond that path was our family's land. It was summer then, and the chirping of insects and croaking of frogs filled the air. I was sitting, biting my pen, when I heard something scratching at the wall. The scratching grew louder and clearer, a rustling sound like someone's fingernails scraping against our wall, as if the wall was about to be pierced through. I was terrified. I immediately turned off the light, went to bed, muttered prayers, and tried to sleep. The next morning, before going to school, I walked around to the back of the house and looked at the wall near my room. There were deep claw marks on the wall. The nails must have been as hard as iron or stone, but there were no footprints anywhere around. I went to school. By then, I was in high school, so I only walked a short distance from my house into the village, then walked with a group of friends to school. Things were relatively calm then. Only, every night, I would hear the scratching of fingernails on the wall. The scratching went on for almost a week, until my parents discovered it. A villager passing by the fields thought someone was trying to break into our house and called my parents to ask about it. My parents were horrified. They took out the computer and let my village friends come over after school to use it for a while before going home. Thanks to that, I no longer heard the scratching on the wall at night. This method was effective, but only for 3 or 4 days. The friends who used to come over every day stopped coming, as the road leading to our house was deserted in the evening. One day, there was heavy rain. I couldn't ride my bike, so my father drove me. That day, the teacher kept the class a little longer to finish up, so school ended late. When we arrived home, the rain had stopped. I borrowed a friend's bike to her house in the village, then walked home alone. The path home, though on both sides were fields, was now paved with concrete all the way to the next commune. Occasionally, a car would pass by. It was sunny, and almost everyone was eating dinner or taking a nap. On the winding road, I saw a lone figure walking through the fields towards home. I heard footsteps behind me. It was midday, and I assumed someone was playing a prank, so I tried to walk faster, taking uneven steps so they wouldn't catch up. But the footsteps behind me grew closer and closer. I turned around and saw a young woman running after me. I panicked and ran. I didn't hear the footsteps anymore, so I turned back but saw no one. Suddenly, a deafening screech. "Get out of the way!" A 4-seater car sped towards me, right in front of me. Someone pushed me aside, and I fell, losing consciousness. When I woke up, I found myself in the commune clinic, with my mother's worried face beside me and a middle-aged man. My father explained that this man was the driver of the 4-seater car. At that moment, he was visiting relatives in the next commune. He kept driving, as if possessed, unable to see me in front of him. It wasn't until I was right in front of his car that his eyes were unveiled. A sudden thought flashed through his mind. Oh no, I've hit someone. As his hand swerved the steering wheel, my mother quickly pulled me to the side of the road. We both tumbled into the rice paddy, which was muddy and shallow with water. My mother had been working in the fields and was exhausted. After dinner, she had gone to lie down. As she was drifting off, she saw my maternal grandfather standing by her bed, urging her, "Go, quickly, your child is coming home." My mother jolted awake, disoriented, and rushed out to the road where she saw me. I was about 10 meters from the house, and a car was speeding towards me like a wild beast. My mother only had time to run to me and push me away, falling herself in the process. My father, running behind my mother, also fell into the paddy. The driver's car spun out, coming to rest right next to a small earthen grave with a few burnt incense sticks. The driver was unharmed. After a moment of shock, he and my father helped my mother and me out of the paddy. My mother was still conscious, so she went home to wash up and change. My father carried me to the clinic in the driver's car. The nurse at the clinic examined me and assured my parents that I was only too scared and had fainted, with no other injuries. That night, my father was deep in thought, full of worry. He took me home. Everyone knew I was a good student. With the dream of attending a top high school, my parents sent me to my paternal grandparents' house in our ancestral village. My paternal grandparents had many children, so I had many cousins there. My mother hoped that the increased positive energy there would help me. I played with my younger cousins every day, fighting and playing games, or sitting in my grandparents' yard playing O and Quan. Whenever it was hot, my cousins and I would jump into the river in front of the house to swim. My paternal hometown was peaceful, the river wide and sandy, perfect for swimming. The children in the village went out to swim every afternoon. Adults also came to teach the children how to swim. My job was to sit on the bank and watch our clothes and sandals. I noticed an old man who frequently came to the river, dipping his feet into the water. His hair was messy, his clothes tattered. Sometimes he would step into the water, but only for a moment before coming out again. That night, I asked my grandma about it. She told me that long ago, He was a handsome, renowned student who became a teacher and was sent to an undeveloped area to teach. After a year, he asked his parents for permission to marry a girl from the ethnic minority group near where he taught. From his behavior, his parents knew he had been bewitched, so they forbade him from returning there and kept him at home. They brought in a shaman to perform an exorcism. After the ritual, he stopped going to the river, but he became more and more absent-minded, like a soulless person. That day, as usual, I was playing by the river with my cousins. I saw Mr. Clark sitting there, I didn't know since when. Brother Trio, whose eyesight was poor, mistook his long shadow on the sand for a dark spot. I was still playing at the water's edge, teasing the small fish with my bare feet. Suddenly, the water beneath my thin feet gave way, sucking me down, and I plunged into the water. The water near the bank was shallow, but for some reason, I couldn't get up, as if someone was pulling me down. I choked on the water, almost suffocating, unable to lift my head. My mouth filled with water and sand. My feet struggled, but I couldn't move them. I cried soundlessly, thinking of my parents at home, my heart aching. Suddenly, someone lifted me out of the water. I coughed violently, crying and spluttering. When I opened my eyes, I saw Mr. Clark's face, his tears streaming down. He held me tightly, not saying a word. After a moment, he turned and went home. It was then that my cousins rushed out of the river, frantically asking what happened. I was still busy catching my breath, unable to answer. After a moment, I realized how precious ordinary life was. That day, my cousins and I were so terrified that we quickly gathered our clothes and went home. Suddenly, one of them pointed to the river, where something was floating eerily where I had almost drowned. The adults nearby rushed over, and when they poked it, they discovered it was a dead body. It looked old, almost completely decomposed. We were all pale with fear. We had played many pranks before, but this was the first time I had been so close to a corpse. Every child has a bit of curiosity, and even though we were scared, we still wanted to satisfy it. This time, my curiosity almost led to disaster. As my cousins were still lingering around the corpse, even after the uncles had moved it away, I craned my neck to look. The corpse was decomposed, but from the remaining hair, I could tell it was a woman. Dusk was falling and a chill went through me. The sky grew dark and the temperature dropped sharply. Later, my grandma heard my story about almost drowning and immediately lit incense at the ancestral altar. Then she went to Mr. Clark's house to thank him. That night, I didn't sleep well. All night, I felt like someone was calling my name, faintly, lingering in my dreams. I saw a shadowy figure flickering outside the gate, beckoning me to go out. I stood hesitant at the door, unwilling to step outside. The slender, gaunt woman with long hair covering her face peeked out from the gate. A strangely sweet fragrance wafted into every cell of my olfactory senses. Even in my dream, I knew I had to be cautious of things I didn't fully understand, but the fragrance was so pleasant, as if urging me to step out immediately. As if she had waited a long time and saw no change in my mind, the woman turned and started to walk away. I remained frozen at the door, refusing to move. The woman took a few steps, then turned back, intending to push down the fence leading to my maternal grandparents' garden to come in. Suddenly, several unfamiliar old men appeared, grabbing the fence and driving the woman away. I turned back into the house, and my dream dissolved. I didn't tell my grandma because the very next evening, after the body that had floated downriver reached our village, Grandma forbade us from swimming in the river anymore. If I had told her about this dream, she would have sent me back to my parents immediately, which would have been a shame. At home, I had few friends, but here, I had many cousins to play with. We still played happily in the village, just not daring to go near the river anymore. Sometimes, the woman from my dream would pass by our gate, and I would still smell her faint fragrance. That day I came home from school with a fever. I hadn't eaten anything at noon. I climbed into bed and fell asleep. In my dream, I saw the woman standing at the gate, waiting for me, her face familiar. The familiar scent wafted into my nose again. I hesitated, then stepped out. Just as I reached the gate, the woman quickly reached out and grabbed my hand. This time, I didn't smell the pleasant fragrance. Instead, a foul, pungent odor assaulted my nostrils. I was dragged out of my grandparents' yard. In the blink of an eye, I was at the riverbank. A chilling sensation ran through me. I saw countless white shadows flickering on the water's surface. My mouth hung open as I watched the water slowly part, creating a path directly down into the riverbed. The woman dragged me along. I looked up, stunned, to see a pale face in front of me, chunks of flesh hanging down, exposing white bone. Her eye sockets were swollen, no longer recognizable. If she shook her head, her eyes would surely fall out. Her mouth gushed black liquid, and the smell was horrific. I couldn't help but gasp. The woman still faced me, but one side of her face looked terrifying as she slowly approached. The stench of the corpse, the smell of decaying protein in the water, was unbearable. I was horrified, my feet rooted to the spot, unable to lift them. I reached out a bony hand, shaking, begging her to let me go. But she was determined to drag me down into the river. All around was inky blackness, and white shadows drifted, swirling closer to me. I felt suffocated, unable to breathe. I panicked and screamed. This time, I heard my own voice. I opened my eyes to find myself lying in bed, surrounded by uncles and relatives. Incense from the ancestral altar wafted in, thick and sweet. I had escaped death once more. This time, my mother had placed a peace charm, freshly consecrated at the pagoda, around my neck. It turned out that morning, Grandma had called my mother from the post office, urging her to come and pick me up immediately. So when I woke up that morning, Grandma was gone. She feared that the previous day's events would affect me. Grandma's intuition was correct. My mother took a bus straight from home to my maternal grandparents' village. I had just laid down and drifted off to sleep when my mother arrived. She saw me open my eyes and rushed to embrace me as if I had returned from the dead. According to my uncle's recount, I had almost died again. Everyone thought I had heat stroke and fainted, but now my mother knew it wasn't that. So she went to the ancestral altar, lit incense, and prayed to the ancestors to protect me and help me return. I was awake, but my body was still weak. I couldn't sit up. My mother sat by my bed, her brow furrowed with worry. That night, as our entire family was preparing to sleep, we heard a sudden, violent gust of wind outside. I vaguely drifted off to sleep, with my mother still murmuring prayers by my side. I couldn't make out what she was saying. Outside, the wind howled fiercely, shaking the mango trees, even though there was no weather forecast for such strong winds. The woman was no longer standing silently outside the gate. She was trying to yank open my grandparents' gate. Her hair, dripping with water, hung over her face. Clumps of foul-smelling mud, along with dead frogs, fish, and rats, were repeatedly thrown into the house, banging against the doors and windows. Grandpa quickly lit more incense on the altar, and the house was suddenly filled with light. At that time, my grandparents' house still didn't have a phone, so they couldn't reach the uncles and other relatives in the village. They could only sit silently in the house, enduring. Grandma sat on the bed with Mom and me, continuously chanting Amitabha Buddha to calm herself. The gate was under siege, the garden torn apart. Dead frogs were hurled against the door until almost dawn. When the rooster's crow echoed, the attacks gradually subsided and then completely stopped. The next morning, around 8 o'clock, the village was abuzz with news. Mr. Clark, the teacher everyone used to call the crazy old man, was found dead by the river. No one knew when he had fallen into the water. His face was gray and bloody, lying face down on the bank. Villagers who went fishing early found him dead. They said it was because he had saved me the day before and the river god had taken him. They brought him home and placed a boiled egg on a bowl of rice on his bed. Several times, people tried to close his eyes, but they remained wide open, staring blankly, as if before he died, Mr. Clark had witnessed something truly terrifying. Strangely, no one could light incense for him. The incense sticks, when lit and placed in the bowl of rice, kept breaking. Often, a stick would light up, then immediately go out. Everyone understood this was a bad omen, so they sent someone to the next commune to invite Master Lee, a shaman. Heen, who was only about 30 years old and familiar with the local waterways, lived about 10 kilometers from Mr. Clark's house. Heen left early in the morning but hadn't returned by noon. The villagers grew worried because the main incense stick lit for the deceased still wouldn't burn. This time, the village sent 2 other men, Mr. Van, a professional grave digger, and Mr. Chan, a sexton. These 2 were known to be braver than most. Mr. Van and Mr. Chan reached the middle of the field, where a thick fog suddenly rolled in. The field was vast, the wind heavy. The road, which had been bustling earlier, was now eerily silent. This illogical silence made the 2 brave men tense. It was an open, deserted field, yet there were many creatures living in the area, especially as harvest season approached. Humans and animals alike should have been busy, but the air was thick, heavy, as if you could hear a pin drop. The distant power lines, like towering walls, seemed to narrow in, threatening Mr. Van and Mr. Chan. Mr. Van gripped the handlebars tighter to steady his trembling hands. Mr. Chan, sitting behind him, suddenly nudged Mr. Van, silently warning him 1,000 times not to look back. As they reached the area of Duong Hai Commune, Heen was on his way back, with Master Li riding behind him. Master Li arrived at the village gate, and Heen stopped. The shaman stepped off the motorbike, looked up at the darkening sky, then waved Heen away. He walked into the village, stopping to observe and glance around, occasionally bending down to pick up a few stones by the road. Heen, Mr. Van, and Mr. Chan turned off their motorbikes and followed him on foot. Master Li reached Mr. Clark's house just before noon. The large trees in Mr. Clark's garden were full of leaves. Many crows, appearing from nowhere, perched on the branches. Master Li stepped inside, pulled a handful of incense sticks from his bag, and lit them at the ancestral altar. He cast a divination. The incense sticks in his hand were long and straight, unlike ordinary incense sticks bought at the market. A faint, pleasant fragrance filled the air, lifting the spirits of those present. It was known that before Master Li arrived, no one could light incense for Mr. Clark. Master Li finished his divination without saying anything, his face solemn. He cast 3 more divinations in a row, each one deepening the furrow in his brow. He shook his head, then asked someone nearest to him to boil an egg and bring it to him. He walked to the bed where Mr. Clark lay, placed his hand on the deceased's middle finger, which had a piece of yellow paper clipped to it. He waved his hand, and a burnt charcoal mark appeared on Mr. Clark's forehead. As he lowered his hand, foul-smelling, muddy earth gushed from Mr. Clark's mouth. His ears, eye sockets, and nostrils bled fresh blood, horrifying everyone. At that moment, the grave digger finally managed to make a complete incense stick burn. Master Li approached, muttering prayers, then gently closed Mr. Clark's wide, lifeless eyes. His eyes finally closed. Before people could mourn Mr. Clark's sudden passing, a chill ran through everyone. It was midday, and not a single leaf on the trees stirred, yet inside Mr. Clark's house, it felt as if a powerful air conditioner was running. Everyone in the house shivered. The boiled egg was ready. Mr. Van took it, then inserted it into the bowl of rice where the incense stick was burning. Just as Master Li pulled a peachwood sword from his bag, the sky suddenly turned dark, and black clouds gathered around the village, plunging the house into darkness. Everyone rushed to turn on the lights. Mr. Clark lived alone, with only a single incandescent bulb hanging from a long, dangling wire in the middle of the house. Master Li looked around, his face grim. He took a bundle of yellow talismans from his bag, bit his 3 fingers to draw blood, and then drew a winding character on a talisman. He turned to the main door and said, "If you stop now, I will perform a simple ceremony to help the deceased let go of his resentment and pass on peacefully. I will forgive you, but if you insist on taking a life, I will ensure your spirit is scattered, with no chance of reincarnation." The surroundings were silent, not a sound. Then, a chilling laughter echoed in the air, making everyone tremble. Master Li stood tall as a wooden statue, his fierce eyes fixed on the door. It was still dark outside. The light bulb inside the house swayed as if a strong wind was blowing through, casting flickering shadows of people and pillars. Those attending to Mr. Clark's affairs held their breath. They wanted to flee, but dared not make a sound. A strange premonition rose within them. Perhaps they shouldn't have stayed out of curiosity to witness this ritual. Master Li watched the light bulb swing faster and faster. He spoke, his voice booming like thunder, "You have chosen to fight to the end. Do not beg me later, I will show no mercy." With that, he brandished the peach wood sword, which had characters written on it in his blood. The sword flew through the air, stopping directly above Mr. Clark's chest, then burst into flames. The charcoal quickly spread over the corpse. The atmosphere in the village was somber. Except for the strong men and village officials who were helping with the arrangements, no one dared to leave their homes. My grandparents and mother were no exception. On the altar, incense smoke wafted thickly, with many mulberry branches and thorny vines stuck in the incense burner. My grandma spent the entire morning arranging mulberry branches under the fence, which served as the boundary between our house and the neighbors. My mother also didn't leave my side for a moment. Everyone's face showed unease and weariness. I lay on the bed, trying to read some books borrowed from my cousins, but I couldn't focus. For some reason, tears kept rolling down my face, though I wasn't crying. After the talismans were placed all over Mr. Clark's body, Master Li instructed the villagers to prepare the body for burial. 6 nails were hammered into the 4 corners of the coffin and in the center of the lid. Master Lee had given specific instructions for this, and the hammering had to be done by young, healthy men. Inside the house, the lights were still on. The light bulb was dim, flickering slightly, but it kept those present from letting their guard down. The crows, as if sensing something, remained silently perched on the tree branches, constantly peering towards the house. After the burial preparations were complete, it was afternoon. Master Lee still hadn't eaten or drunk anything. He sat cross-legged in front of the deceased's incense bowl. He was inviting the spirit. In front of him was an old, tattered book, so worn that the characters were illegible. In one hand, he held a string of prayer beads, in the other, something that looked like a wooden bell. Although his eyes were closed, his eyebrows were continuously furrowed. He slowly counted each bead on the string, muttering prayers incessantly. A long, dark stream of sweat trickled down his forehead, drop by drop onto the ground. Throughout the embalming process, nothing major had happened, but it was clear that no one felt everything was resolved. The quiet atmosphere was eerie, even the crows seemed restless. The light bulb inside the house no longer swayed. It was getting dark. Mr. Clark's house was filled with light, but the scene was no less chilling. The shadows stretched long and thin, alternating between light and darkness. Most of those who stayed were inside, surrounding the shaman. Even if someone needed to use the restroom, they would go in groups. The crows remained perched, a symbol of impending death. My grandparents' house was still securely locked. The tension hung heavy in every breath. Grandma used garlic and ginger to flavor our meal. There were no meat dishes on the table. No one needed to be told. Even the bowls and chopsticks were handled carefully, making no clinking sounds as they usually would. I was still so tired that my body ached. Occasionally, I glanced out the gate and still saw a shadowy figure, seemingly hiding, reaching out to call me, but no longer attempting to break down the gate as before. By midnight, some of the older women were dozing off inside the house. The men, who were officials, had temporarily forgotten their fear from the morning and sat in groups, playing a traditional card game. The atmosphere had eased a bit. Master Lee still sat in front of the coffin, as if in a trance. If one paid attention, they could still see him tightly gripping the prayer beads, and the characters in the ancient book seemed to dance and leap around him. Precisely at midnight, as everyone was engrossed in their games, Master Lee suddenly sprang to his feet. At that moment, the crows cried out as if their hearts were bursting, flapping their wings erratically throughout the house. He yelled loudly, "Quickly, get the incense bowls, don't let them go out." Everyone reacted quickly, abandoning their games and rushing to the altar, surrounding Master Lee and the coffin. In one hand, he held the sword, in the other, the prayer beads. He flung the old, blood-written book into the air. The winding characters from the book curled up and then scattered, swirling around the crows. The crows flew wildly, colliding with the characters from the ancient book, then shrieked and crashed to the floor, falling to the ground in a scattered mess. The entire process lasted only about 10 seconds, but Master Lee looked as if all his life force had been drained. He had to lean on the sword to stand steadily. The witnesses were still reeling, unable to recover. They had never witnessed such a mystical event firsthand before, so they remained rooted to the spot, their mouths involuntarily agape. It wasn't until Master Lee spoke, telling everyone to gather the dead crows into a bag for disposal, that they snapped back to reality. Fortunately, both incense bowls were still burning, their smoke wafting upwards. He slumped to the floor, then called out for everyone to prepare him a vegetarian meal. He ate a few quick bowls of rice, then called Heen and Mr. Van, giving them instructions. Tomorrow morning, at exactly 8 a.m., 4 strong men are to go east and cut 4 bamboo poles, each exactly 3 thuok long. Bring them to the grave site and plant them at the 4 corners of the grave. Dig the grave on the highest mound in the village, facing east, exactly 3 thuok deep. It must not be uneven, and there must be no water in it. It's still dark now. Wait until after 5:30 a.m. to go. You can rest for a bit at my house. He then went to a corner of the wall and leaned against it to rest. It was called resting, but his eyebrows remained tightly furrowed. No one dared to disturb him. When the incense sticks had burned down, they quietly lit new ones. Now the crows were no longer flapping, but the surroundings were terrifyingly silent. The frogs and crickets, which usually chirped loudly, were nowhere to be heard. The air was thick and strange. The women working for the funeral who needed to go outside always felt a chill. Sometimes, their hair would stand on end, as if someone was staring intently from behind. At 6 a.m., a disciple of Master Li arrived on a motorbike, carrying many items that the villagers didn't recognize or had never seen before, only familiar yellow banners fluttering in the wind behind the vehicle. Master Li stepped out and instructed the villagers that no one was to go near the river before the burial. He then took out a small, round box, sealed with a yellow talisman inscribed with Chinese characters, and handed it to Mr. Van, saying, "Take this box to Mr. Clark's house and tell his daughter-in-law to bring the little girl home this afternoon and immediately put this bracelet on her wrist. Do not let her leave the house. After she leaves the house, she must not look back, and no matter what she hears, she must keep moving forward without hesitation. After the girl is in the car, throw this box into the river. Only you must go, and you must use a bamboo pole that contains no metal whatsoever." Mr. Van's hand trembled as he took the box. It felt as heavy as 1,000 pounds. Master Li tilted his head back, looking at the dark, sunless sky, sighed, and then walked towards the riverbank. Everyone followed his instructions. No one dared to approach. They watched his figure and that of his disciple disappear from view. No one noticed the muddy footprints, appearing and disappearing on the ground right behind Master Li's steps. Master Li had been gone for about half an hour when dark clouds began to cover the sky. The remaining crows in the house flew out, seemingly trying to discard the dead body, but what terrified everyone was that there were no crows in the bag. Only a few pieces of black, damp, muddy cloth lay eerily still, as if the previous night's attack had only been in everyone's imagination. Master Li reached the riverbank, and the sky had turned completely black, a moonless night. He remained calm, taking out each item and arranging them on a 3-tiered altar, as if his eyes could see through the dark curtain. After arranging everything, he sent his disciple back, remaining alone to set up the ritual. His demeanor was calm and resolute, as if he didn't feel the river churning with violent waves. Thunder rumbled across the sky, lightning flashed, tearing through the darkness, and thunderbolts repeatedly struck the river's surface. With a powerful lighter, he lit 2 candles. He chanted scriptures, then plunged them into the center of the first tier of the altar. An unnatural wind from the river rushed over, seemingly trying to extinguish the 2 candles. Strangely, despite the strong wind, the flames only flickered like dancing fireflies, refusing to go out. Master Li sat cross-legged, back straight, continuously counting the prayer beads, muttering incantations. His eyebrows furrowed more and more with each passing minute, yet he continued to chant without pause, his hands constantly moving the prayer beads. Everyone was digging the grave, but their faces were pale. The reason was that when they looked into the grave, water kept seeping in. They told each other to use long scoops to bail out the water, but it was no use. Mr. Van rushed home to get a pump, but the hole was as big as a pond, and no matter how much water they pumped out, it filled up again. The strange thing was that the pumped water quickly absorbed into the ground, leaving almost no trace. It wasn't until the clouds gradually dispersed and the sunlight slowly pierced through that the water in the grave was gone. It was completely dry, not a single drop of water. So, Mr. Clark was buried at exactly 12 noon. The villagers collectively breathed a sigh of relief. I still wandered lethargically in my grandparents' house, not daring to step out of bed. All my personal hygiene was handled by my mother. Inside the house, I still heard faint, chilling cackles, but outside the gate, there was no longer any shadowy figure lurking. The ancestral altar was thick with incense smoke. Grandpa, after receiving the box from Mr. Van, immediately brought it inside and placed it carefully on the altar. For the past few days, my entire family, from top to bottom, had been eating vegetarian meals, and today was no exception. Grandma cooked a pot of green bean porridge with ginger. Each spoonful of shimmering porridge, with a hint of warmth, was a testament to the family's love I was fortunate to have. My father only had me as a daughter, but he didn't let my grandparents neglect this delicate girl. I ate every spoonful of porridge, fearing Grandma would be sad if I skipped a meal. I didn't know if Master Li had finished his work or how he got home, but I only knew that at exactly 1 p.m., Grandpa led me to the bus station. Back then, taxis weren't as common as they are now, mostly seen on TV. For long-distance travel, buses were the most popular and chosen mode of transportation. When I stepped out of the gate, the surroundings were eerily silent. No wind, no sound. It was as if the world I was stepping into was separated from everyday life before the incident. Following Master Lee's instructions, I walked straight to the end of the road where the bus stopped. I didn't hesitate. I got on the bus and found a seat for my mother and me. In my hand was the shaman's bracelet, and around my neck was the peace charm my mother had gotten from the pagoda, which gave me some reassurance. There weren't many passengers on the bus. The space was quiet. Just as I settled in, the bus started moving. Thump! The bus tilted, as if something very heavy had fallen onto its roof. My mother instinctively pulled me close, muttering prayers. The driver quickly got off to check, but seeing nothing suspicious, he climbed back into the driver's seat, grumbling a few curses. I didn't immediately notice the strangeness on the bus. Only when the bus stabilized its motion did I realize there was no sound at all. All the passengers on the bus wore cold, emotionless faces, like soulless beings. My mother and I sat in the middle row. Following Master Lee's instructions, I dared not turn my head to look at the back of the bus. So, leaning forward slightly, I saw a woman covered in mud, her face obscured, sitting at the very back of the bus, not saying a word, her chilling gaze clearly fixed on me. A cold shiver ran down my spine. At that moment, my grandpa had reached the riverbank. Following Master Lee's instructions, he dug a deep hole and buried the box, not far from Master Lee's altar and ritual array. But my grandpa saw nothing, as if blindfolded. Just as he finished burying the box, a flash of lightning struck the river, accompanied by deafening thunder and a streak of light across the sky. Only then did my grandpa see Master Lee swinging his sword, slashing at the water's surface. The yellow talismans floated in the air, forming a circular paper shield above the shaman's head. Master Lee leaped up, swung his sword, and all the spinning stones and paper talismans flew back towards the river. A deafening explosion echoed, as if the river had burst open, and huge masses of water erupted. The clouds gradually cleared, and the sunlight slowly pierced through everything. A moment later, my grandpa saw Master Lee lying prostrate on the ground, blood still on his lips. He quickly retrieved the sword and the ancient book. Just as my grandpa was about to call for the villagers, Master Lee's disciple appeared. My grandpa brought Master Lee home. The bus was speeding along the road when it suddenly screeched to a halt. My mother jumped up, and instinctively I stood up too, looking in the direction of her gaze. Ahead was a low bridge barrier, only about 50 cm high. If the bus hit that barrier, and the driver pressed the accelerator just a little more, it would plunge directly into the churning river. But the passengers sitting in front of my mother and me showed no reaction, as if they were just soulless corpses, unaware of the impending danger. It was around 2 p.m., and the sun, which had been hidden by dark clouds all morning, now shone brightly directly into the bus. The driver's face was pale. His hands trembled as he held the peace charms and muttered prayers. I saw the driver standing at the front of the bus, clutching his chest, afraid to move. He pulled the gear lever but couldn't help himself. Unable to control my curiosity and without thinking, I turned to look behind me. No one was sitting in the back row. The entire bus was still eerie. The driver didn't stop the bus but leaned his head back, speaking to my mother, "You too, come sit in the front seats. They're empty. It's more comfortable up here." "Why sit so far back?" my mother agreed, then pulled me, clinging to the seats for balance, to the front. As I walked, I trembled. The emotionless passengers were nowhere to be seen. The seats were now empty. I hesitantly asked, and the driver replied, "I couldn't find any passengers this morning, so the bus left late. It's just you two and me today." My grandpa stayed at Master Lee's house to take care of his disciple, as instructed by the master. Master Lee's disciple took the ancient book and the sword to the pagoda on the hill to seal them, with strict instructions never to open them. The sealed earth, imbued with all of Master Lee's spiritual power, ensured that the water demon would never be able to escape. If the book were opened, my grandpa's entire village would be in grave danger, let alone someone with a yin aura like me. Master Lee woke up. The first thing he said to my grandpa was, the bus that took the girl to the north, besides her and her mother, only carried the water demon's incarnate form, so I sealed it before it could drag the entire bus into the river. He paused to catch his breath, then continued, "This water demon has been following your family for a very long time. She drowned herself and her child in the river because she was unhappy with her husband. Her child was reincarnated. It was your grandchild. She tried to take the girl away since she was at school, but thanks to the blessings of both her paternal and maternal families, she couldn't do anything. It wasn't until she accidentally fell into the river that the demon had an opportunity, but Mr. Clark stopped her. He paused again, gasping for air, then used all his strength to say the last sentence. She is now suppressed and can no longer harm anyone. But you must also remember, to ensure your granddaughter's well-being, you must always do good and avoid evil. You must accumulate merit if you hope to escape these recurring misfortunes and find peace. Go home, I'm tired. My grandpa helped Master Lee lie down, then after tidying up, stepped out the door. By now, it was dusk. My grandpa walked alone on the small path through the fields. All around, thousands of reeds swayed. The wind from the river, once gentle, now made him shiver. I returned home after a long journey to find my father standing at the gate, anxiously watching for my mother and me. Before stepping into the house, I turned to look out at the vast fields. The wind rustled the grass as if laughing at me. Without hesitation, I walked straight into the house, seeking safety with my parents. 2 days later, my grandpa called to inform us that Master Lee had passed away. A strange, unsettling feeling washed over me, as if everything was not yet over, and something was still waiting for me in the near future.